Hello and welcome to this webinar with IWSC and BevZero. We are talking about the exciting and growing category of no and low spirits, but wines as well, and beers and everything. We've got a great panel here signed and together to talk about this. So less from me and more from them. He'll have an introduction from each of them. Irem, if you could start, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. Yeah, this is Irem, Eren, and I am the Business Development Director of BevZero, which is a global leader in the dealcoholization and alcohol management. But my background is wine, and I have like more than, let's say, 12, 13 years experience in the wine industry and like working from every part of the supply chain. And since last 5 years, I'm specialized in no and low, and I would consider myself like a category ambassador. But I still continue teaching wine and judging. But I'm super excited to be here and talk about no and low.
Fabulous, thank you, Laura.
Hiya, I'm Laura. I run Club Soda, which is the mindful drinking movement here in the UK. We do lots of things around research around low and no and advocacy for consumers and for brands, and also have a shop at the moment in Covent Garden. So if you want to come along and see what a good range of low and no looks like, that's the place to go.
Brilliant, definitely worth going along. Popped in there myself, very nice indeed. Florian, please.
Thank you, David. So my name is Florian. I'm the manager of the French office of Ciatti, which is a global bulk broker, wine, spirits, grape business. And thanks for the invitation. Actually, it's a pleasure to be there and also explain what's going on more inside of the industry and all this new category coming up. Is also interesting the growers or the buyers who are mostly bottlers with who we are dealing with. So happy to answer to any kind of question or to react if you have anything that comes to your mind.
Lovely, thank you. And Claire?
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Warner. I currently am the head of advocacy for Diageo and also the co-founder of Acorn, which is the sister brand to Seedlip. And it's interesting, Florian, that you said this is a new category because Seedlip will celebrate its 10th anniversary next year. So it's not very, very young. But I consider myself as a sort of positive drinking pioneer and really happy to have been flying this flag for many years now in the same way that Laura and Irem have. I also am the chair for the International Spirits competition, for the alternative drinks competition and awards. So really love seeing how much innovation that we've been seeing over the last few years as well.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And finally, Morten, please.
Thank you so much, David. My name is Morten. I'm the founder of Ish, Copenhagen-based alcohol-free brand. So we specialize in non-alcoholic wine, spirits, and cocktails. We've been around since 2017 and exporting to about 25 different markets. And one of the pillars that we really treasure ourselves on is the flavor profiles of the drinks that we create. I'm also a proud member of ANBA and part of the board of ANBA, which is the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, which is both a chapter in the US, but also in the EU and UK. So on the EU-UK side, I'm proud to be a member of that organization where we try to lead the way and really a lot of legislation and compliance stuff that we take care of in collaboration with Laura, especially on the UK side. So just a big fan of the category and very excited to be part of this call here.
Fabulous, thank you very much. Well, as Claire mentioned, you know, we're probably about a decade in, aren't we? From what was really seen as something separate, and I think it is very exciting how things have changed. There is terms involved, and even I, as someone, you know, that's been involved in judgings and in the sector, sometimes get confused by things like what is no and what is low, and Is that the same for wine and for spirits and all this kind of thing? Right. I mean, Claire, are you all right to talk a little bit? And mate, I think Laura, it looks like you've definitely got something to say. So please.
I mean, I'll easily cede to Laura in a second, but I think, look, it's confusing for us and we're experts. So, you know, imagine how it must feel as a consumer. I think this category has exploded over the last 10 years, and there has been so much innovation. And with that comes, you know, great excitement, but also some confusion, I think. But essentially, you know, no is well, actually, I'm going to let Laura speak because no ABV and alc-free and all the ways that we define it is also currently being looked at by the government. But essentially, alc-free or non-alc is under 0.5, and I'm sure Laura will correct me if I'm wrong. And I think for me, low is the area that we probably get a little bit caught up on, because you know, what's low for me might not be low enough for you, and that is probably an area that will evolve as, sorry, I'm suffering from a cold, which is why I'm like sounding rubbish. So, but no will probably, low ABV will probably be an area that really will be looked at for greater definition over time. But I think ultimately, you know, this is all being driven by consumer demand. And so that's what's most exciting, is that, you know, we're getting a lot of response to what consumers are looking for. And, you know, all of the innovation is supporting a consumer's desire to moderate. And we're seeing, you know, up to 74% of consumers in GB looking to moderate. So, you know, ultimately, you know, it's all very exciting. But yes, classification, language is all super important and definitely does need to be a little bit tightened up. Laura?
Well, you know, if you ever want to, we could just do a whole hour on this, I suspect.
Yeah.
Across Europe, definitions are, things differ. You know, if you're in Italy, 1.2 is alcohol free, for example. And I'm sure Morten knows more about that, having his product across the whole of Europe. In the UK, we've got a slight problem, which is the only thing that's been going on longer than the low and no alcohol space is the discussion around what low and no alcohol should be called, because that came in a food labelling bill in 2014. And this government, the successive governments have not quite managed to get it over the line in what we call low and no. So in theory, in the UK, 0 to 0.5 should be called low alcohol, and 0.0 can be called alcohol free, and 0.01 upwards, 0.1 upwards should be called low alcohol. So basically, it's a bit confusing, which is also why when you see data and stats talk about low and no, generally they're still talking about products 0.5 and below, which means we don't get to see what the growing market for low ABV products is either. So we do need to sort that out in the UK. There is a letter that we've got going to ministers very shortly that was signed at the conference a couple of weeks ago that will encourage them, because it doesn't need legislation, to sort it out. But across Europe, it can differ. But of course, rights of recognition for trade across Europe mean that it can be called whatever it's called in the country that it's made in. So yeah, it continues to be complicated, made even more complicated by the fact that big brand extensions tend to come in at 0.0. They tend to hero 0.0 in their publicity, and they've got more money than anybody else to do that publicity. And so the consumer gets a little bit confused and even gets a little bit frightened about 0.5%, when that's a really sad place to be. And for future development, that would narrow and back everybody into a corner if we thought 0.0 was the only place to be, bearing in mind that most 0.0 alcohol-free drinks have got less alcohol in than soft drinks, because of course soft drinks don't have to put their ABV on, even though they can be up to 0.5. There you are. I'm sure no one's any clearer on that.
Sometimes alcohol-free drinks have less alcohol than a ripe banana.
Yeah, madness. So
or yogurt. Yogurt is also a fermented product, you know. Well, yeah, it's madness.
And I can.
We've killed the conversation with legislation.
I can say what Laura said as well in terms of consumers. It can be confusing. In Denmark, where we're at, we can be up to 0.5. In most European countries as well, up to 0.5, and that's where we are. That's where we can still use natural ingredients to extract from. That's where we can make the best tasting products and the ones that satisfies the most. And that's why we've chosen to be in that area. And like Laura said, it's the same as, you know, you can mention a bunch of stuff. It can be soy or goma dress, you know, they all have like 0.3 or 2 or something. So it is a confusing aspect, and there needs to be clarification in order to make non-alcoholic products available and comfortable for the consumers to enjoy without the confusing.
Yeah, I think there's some very, very good points there. And of course, as you said, this is one of the things that has been a constant discussion over the last 10 years. But other things have changed quite a lot. You know, as Claire was saying, Seedlip will celebrate their 10th anniversary next year. But things have changed so much since then. Other products coming out, mentioned other larger brands being involved, and a whole sort of array of different things, both in spirits, but also in wine and beer. Does anyone have any sort of thoughts on how the last what's been going on in the last 10 years? Some of the highlights, perhaps? Florian?
Can I just react
Yes,
to
please.
Claire's reaction when she was saying that it was a new category? I wanted to, it was probably more of my impression, which is generally that in the, let's say in the wine industry at the moment, we are experiencing a quite boring day life, I would say, for bottle producers, but even the most, the players in general, bottlers or people involved in this business for the last 20 years. We see basically that the consumption of wine is going down, which is quite of a, it's not new. I mean, it's a deep trend. And in general, we have this, I'm just finishing a meeting with the growers from the Languedoc, with the producers who are just realizing that we will be uprooting more vines again because of the general trend, which is not good in the wine business. And at least what we can say about this low and no category is that it's bringing more happiness or more excitement in general to the industry, because we can at least see some light at the end of the tunnel, showing that there may be a hope, and there may be some ways to get back to attract some consumers in this business. And we know that in general, the health messages given in most of the countries around the world are pushing to get to lower the consumption of alcohol. And I think that, at least speaking about wine business and not getting into the spirits, we know that when wine was so far only bringing the idea of a product which is traditional, which needs to, I don't know, be handled in a different way than just an alcoholic beverage, it was kind of difficult actually to find to differentiate itself to the other beverages. And getting back to the fact that it's new, it seems that many growers, many consumers, and so many bottlers now realize that there's a growing categories in the wine for the last years, and everybody needs to actually consider that they should add to their portfolio this low or this no product into their range. So yeah, just talking about, let's say, it's felt in the industry at the moment, and it's quite positive, especially in this surrounding bad noise or bad messages that we tend to hear every single day in the wine business.
Actually, here I would like to bring a different perspective, because I think when Florian said in the beginning a new category, I think he was spot on. It's a new category. It doesn't mean that it's new. Yes, we are 10 years away, maybe a decade in the improvement or in the growth of the entire no, but it was not seen as a category. It started as a movement. It was like a trend, and now finally it's a category. Now in the competitions we judge no, and we don't only judge no, we judge non-alcoholic wines, non-alcoholic dealcoholized-based wines separately, functional wine alternatives. So within the no and low, we also have subcategories. So I think this is a very important point to make. Yes, and finally, it's also a category for wine producers, wine growers, because yes, beer, non-alcoholic beer or low alcohol beer paved the way, and spirits, all the mixers, RTDs, they're also going very strong. But wine has always been traditional, still is. But finally now wine industry is seeing this as an opportunity instead of seeing it as a disruption, because I mean, BevZero is operating in Spain for about, let's say, 10 years. But now in the beginning, we were like kind of evils in the industry. But now, like, especially since last 2 years, now like everyone needs it because the consumer is asking for it, importers, distributors are asking for it, but wineries, they cannot at the moment meet the demand because they don't have the know-how. It's also very new for them. So then they like kind of every day we have calls from all around the world, like different wineries. So yeah, finally it is a category. And also one thing that I would like to add from the consumer side, before 10 years ago, this was seen as a sacrifice for different reasons, can be health or religion, or if you're a designated driver. But now it's not a sacrifice anymore, it's a choice. And it is like a passage to being independent, because you don't really need alcohol to have fun or to socialize, you know, so the things are changing. So it's I think it's very exciting.
Completely agree. Sorry. I think to sum it up, it's normalization, right? So it's valid, and I think that's what Irem is saying as well, you know, and it's just becoming normal that is how it is, and we're seeing in the markets that we are present and where we're going deep that the on-trade takes it serious. They know that this is something to be mindful of if they want to be in hospitality for reals. It's something that the consumer expects. It's when we speak to buyers that we spoke to 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, that some of them laughed and some of them thought we were crazy and some didn't even pick up the phone. Then we're talking to them now, and I think that's really rapid in a short amount of years. And as we usually say, it's not necessarily, you know, it's a category with a lot of potential, but we're still in the beginning of it. So we really see this as a beginning of a category, because there's so much way to go, and we're just kind of scratching the surface of what is possible and what is to come in the future.
Laura, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, you know, now that wine's joined the party, it feels like, you know, we can all get going, right? I think that's how it is. We're 10 years old in January, and we did our first piece of research around low and no at the end of 2015. And I guess what's clear is that many of the findings we had from that piece of research, which was about how you could get the on-trade to think more about their non-drinking customers, all of those things are still true. The dial's moved a bit, but there's still a long way to go. And so, yes, we've had a whole 10 years of innovation and disruption and learning and development and all sorts of people joining the category. Now, I think is a really important time, not only in Europe, but globally, to grow low and no. And there's still lots of consumer learning for us to discover.
Just jumping back to the point that you made about 2015, and happy birthday for January, by the way. What was, and I try and cast my mind back, like what was going on in the sort of world of no and low back then, 10 years ago? I mean, what were really the options that people had?
That's very easy to answer. It was a very dusty bottle of Beck's Blue at the furthest away fridge in the pub, and then maybe a J2O. And if you're really lucky, it had glitter in. Woo!
Oh, I remember the glitter.
So that really was it. And the reason why we did our research called Nudging Pubs is Club Soda started off as health tech to help people change their drinking habits. But I am a campaigner by background. And so when people asked me why that it was okay to talk about going out and not drinking, but when they went out, there wasn't anything to drink. That's why we got some funding to do that piece of research. And we identified that there was a lack of interesting drinks designed for adults. And I didn't know that in the background, Ben was, you know, tinkering away, making Seedlip, and Heineken was doing the same with their product. And it wasn't until 2017 that we began to see more than just Seedlip on the market. So, you know, each year, this category gathers momentum, but it's also working at the pace, maybe slightly behind the pace of where the consumer is. And I think that's the interesting challenge for this market today.
Yeah,
I just want to also, maybe if I can, just sort of add some memories to those days, because I was working for a luxury vodka company back in those days, and that the drivers for, you know, health and well-being were already being felt. And I think I was talking about low ABV and low sugar drinks, you know, sort of 2010, 2012, particularly. You know, I was on my campaigning platform talking about how much sugar were in cocktails at that time. So for us, it was about you know, how much, you know, some of the other drivers, and, you know, there's already a kind of like groundswell of health and well-being that was happening, and Beyonce making kale famous, for instance, or like back in 2010, 2011. So, you know, all of these drivers were contributing to an environment that would have made it more welcoming for something like club soda or Seedlip to be adopted. But also, let's not forget that there were other attempts. You know, Aqua Libra, I remember, as kind of maybe one of the early no ABV drinks, which was created by a good friend of mine now. So, you know, there were attempts made, and Beck's Blue is another good example, but I think the consumer wasn't there. I think all the other kind of health and well-being drivers, you know, the long work that had been done around drink driving, and you know, making sure that you've got safe way home, all of that, I think, started to kind of percolate in the minds of consumers, so that, you know, when we start to kind of look for alternatives and there's nothing there, and we are also looking for ways to be healthier or moderate, or we're now more visible because social media is a thing. We don't want to be seen as, like, you know, drunk and partying on Facebook, which was introduced, you know, 2000. I can't remember, 7. So, you know, all of these drivers, I think, were contributing and kind of created the conditions for brands to kind of emerge. But the drivers were certainly much earlier than 10 years ago.
Yes, there used to be that category, what they call it, like an adult soft drink or something like that, was it? There's a brand called Ame, I seem to recall as well, back in the day. But there we go.
Yeah.
So after our walks down memory lane, let's get a little bit more technical, because you know, when with wine and with beer and with spirits, the approach to actually creating the product is different, and so I'm kind of interested in, like, what is the difference between making something that is non-alcoholic and then making something that is de-alcoholized. Perhaps, Irem, if you can start with this, but I know, Claire, obviously you've got a lot of experience from your work with Acorn as well. But Irem, if you could start first, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so that is another confusion, especially for like the labels. But again, I mean, technically it is not confusing. So if you're talking about wine, and if you're talking about like alcohol-free products or wine products, it is not necessarily de-alcoholized. So basically most of them are based on the grape juice, grape must, and then added flavors, and they are sweet because there is lots of sugar in grape juice, grape must, and if there's no fermentation, they don't turn to the alcohol and they just stay as a residual sugar. But if we are talking about de-alcoholized wine, then the grape must goes through the fermentation with the help of the yeast, and then all the grape sugars turn into alcohol. And then obviously not only the important product of the fermentation is alcohol, but all the flavors, because the grape has only grape aromas, but it has lots of aroma and flavor precursors, which turn into the final flavor profile of the wine after fermentation. So that is very important if you want to make a non-alcoholic product which is similar to wine, then we need all the aromas which are happening during the fermentation. So that's why to be able to capture them, the only way is like making the wine and then going through having the wine to go through a dealcoholization process. And also the other benefit of this is we can create dry products. Because with the fermentation, all the sugars turn into, like, they're consumed basically, and then we can have dry and dealcoholized non-alcoholic products. But again, this is creating a confusion, and also in every country, the legislations is different. In the European Union, we follow the OIV definitions, and according to them, dealcoholized wine can be up to 0.5. It doesn't have to be 0.00005. It can be up to 0.5. But however, to be able to call it dealcoholized wine, only the ingredients which are allowed in wine making are allowed to use. So the only thing that we can do is dealcoholization and preserving the aroma. And then if you want to add any other ingredients, that needs to be winemaking ingredient. But if you are using external flavoring, or any herbs, any extract, then we cannot call it dealcoholized wine. Then it needs to be called non-alcoholic beverage based on dealcoholized wine. So it is, and then this also depends on different, each country's legislations is different, is very confusing. But yeah, so basically at the moment, what we see in the market, like 90% of the non-alcoholic wines are dealcoholized wines. But then there are also 9 wine alternative, wine proxies, and the functional beverages. But dealcoholized wine can also be used as an ingredient in all these. And then there are different methods of dealcoholization. Depending on, you know, what the final result that you're expecting, or the, you know, the size or the investment of the company, they can use different methods. But today, the best method is low temperature vacuum distillation to preserve the aromas and to have a balanced product.
Essentially, you're capturing the alcohol, and then what's left in the pot, or it's a flask, isn't it, because it's vacuum distillation, that's where all your flavor is being kept.
Yeah, so basically we can separate from the wine, we can separate 3 fractions. The one fraction is the alcohol, so whatever we have the alcohol, and then we rectify it, and it can go up to 85 ABV. So it is a second product, but then it is also a very important product because it is used in brandy making or vodka making. So this is the one product. And then the second part is the aroma fraction. So we can separate all the aromas of the wine itself. And then the third, what is left, is non-alcoholic version, whatever is base. So then this aroma fraction, we can separate the aromas and we can add back to the dealcoholized wine. Excellent. And then obviously it's not finished yet, because then we still need to do adjustments to kind of have the product ready to be bottled and to be consumed.
Yeah, to get the balance and to get the I'm trying to think of the word now, not consistency, but stabilization. You know, that's another big.
Yeah, that is
because
another
alcohol
issue.
Does provide stabilization, so
definitely, yeah.
consideration for sure.
So that's why also one important thing that you mentioned, like very important, stabilization. I'm not going to go into technical detail, but because there is no alcohol, this product is seen as a food product. So for example, in US, it needs to comply with FDA regulations, because it is, and the stability of a food product is very different. So yes, and it's much more complicated than creating a normal traditional wine.
Thank you. I know we've got some more thoughts on this for sure. Claire, have you got some thoughts from your point of view? And then I'm sure Morten as well. I'm sure you've got some thoughts as well.
Yeah, Morten's probably got loads. I mean, when we started with Acorn, we started with a non-alcoholic base, which was BevZero, and probably had to do quite a lot to prevent that from fermenting, because BevZero loves to ferment. So, you know, a lot of our work was trying to create the conditions to keep that liquid stable. But we started from a place of, you know, being inspired by vermouth. So, you know, having a great base and working with English sparkling wine grape growers, was where we went with that. So we didn't do the de-alcoholizing process. We already started with a non-alcohol, an alcohol-free base, and built from there. And I think what we're seeing now is that the innovation and the investment in innovation is really catching up. So we're able to access really beautiful complex liquids through amazing use of innovation, like Irem just described. And then I think then it unlocks the possibilities for liquids such as wine to be for the alcohol to be removed or to go through that process and not damage the complexity or the elegance or the finesse of that liquid, which is really what the consumer is looking for, is a kind of an experience that's as close to not the real thing, but a very, very similar experience to consuming wine, particularly if we're kind of comparing wine. So that is what's so interesting for me, having judged the IWSC over the last few years, is just seeing the complexity of liquids that are now being produced through unlocking of innovation, which is super exciting.
Yeah, I think so. And there's definitely I'm intrigued if anyone's had any experience with using like water distillation for flavors and things like that. Has anyone, I know certain things work very well, lemongrass and that, but
the Seedlip that's where Seedlip began. That Ben's inspiration came from hard waters, which are essentially water distillates, and lots of the ingredients that he selected were deliberately chosen because of how great they were when they were distilled in that way. And I think that's what created a new to world liquid, because he understood that you could apply distillation techniques, but didn't necessarily have to include alcohol. But I'm sure Morten's got lots to add to the world of that.
Thank you. Well, I think there's a really important distinction, and that is sparkling wines and still wines, if we're talking about de-alcoholizing wine. So in our experience, we get the best results from the de-alcoholization of the wines. Sparkling wines are easier, and when I say easier, it's because our goal is always to be as close to the alcoholic version as possible. That's really why we're here. So that's a whole lot easier with sparkling wines, because when you have alcoholic wines, what happens is the alcohol evaporates and all the aromas and everything will kind of coat the roof of your mouth and your sensors, and you fill up your nose and all of that good stuff. So that's volatility that happens. The carbonation from the non-alcoholic sparkling wines will help that. So getting the really great grapes, getting the de-alcoholization right, and preserving the flavors and all that great stuff that Irem was speaking to, having the carbonation to kind of help lift that in the sparkling wines really lifts the experience. We find it a lot harder when it comes to still wines, because we're not getting any help, right? So we really are struggling to kind of close the gap, so to speak. That's kind of our metaphor. So we have non-alcoholic wine and we have alcoholic wine, in terms of experience. And our goal is always to close that gap. You take an example like beer has done a really great job at closing that gap, where you can have a non-alcoholic beer experience that is similar to a beer experience, and sparkling wines really closing the gap, and the still wines, there's still some gap to go in my impression or opinion, so to speak. So I think that's two really important things there. But the innovation is amazing. BevZero's innovation is incredible, that we're very close with. So it's really exciting to see what is happening. I love the fact that there are proxies and there are the de-alcoholized version as well, because it just shows that there's room for all of it, and I think that really speaks to the validity of the category. So that's exciting. What we've done, last little thing, is we took kind of the idea of not the idea, but the technology behind de-alcoholizing wine, and we applied it to our spirits. So we took our non-alcoholic rum, so our Ish Caribbean spiced, we call it Caribbean spiced, because we took Caribbean rum that de-alcoholized it in the same way that you would do with wine, and then added in vanilla and nutmeg and all kinds of stuff to kind of build it back up again. So that was kind of like a hybrid product in a way to kind of get as close to a rum experience as possible. So, and that's now our third generation of our rum. There'll be a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, because there's a long way to go and we can always get much better. But I think it's so exciting with all that technology and ways to kind of cross them over, you know, and yeah, I think that's super exciting. And I think for the consumer, it's an exciting time to be a mindful drinker.
Sorry, start again. One of the points that you made there made me think about the pre-mixed drinks, or RTDs, if you like, because you were saying about this idea of the still and the sparkling, and I was wondering if you felt the same for, like, say when you're doing a rum and ginger or rum and coke or gin and tonic, because part of that, the ingredients there are already a non-alcoholic product. Does that make that easier to kind of bridge that gap between the two, in your experience?
It does, but what it also does, it makes it easier for the consumer. So a non-alcoholic spirits does require some level of education to mix it properly. We hope that in one of our, you know, 4th, 5th, 7th generation, that you can have our rum and you can drink it neat, and you know, you might as well think it's a Diplomatico. We're not quite there yet, but that's the goal, to get there. When we mix it into a daiquiri, or we make a mojito, or we make a gin and tonic or a paloma with a tequila, we're doing it for the consumer. So we're saying this is it, so we can mix it perfectly, which means that the serve is always perfect, at least in our opinion. And I think for the understanding part of that, for the consumer, it makes it a whole lot easier. So it's an easier way to kind of transist into the category, where a spirit can be a little bit daunting maybe for some.
What I would say though is there's a big difference between, you know, your cocktail RDTs, Morten, and a soft drink that's designed to taste like a cocktail. And at the minute, there's both floating in the ether, and one's definitely better and more adult and suits the occasion than the other. So soft drink manufacturers who think they can just make a soft drink that tastes like a cocktail and not really hitting the mark, and doing a bit of a disservice to the category.
Laura, I think you're going to have to elaborate a little bit for us, because it's fascinating and I want to hear more, please.
Well, you know, I'm not going to name names.
No, of course not.
But it's a bit like the
please,
difference between a mocktail, which is a load of juices smashed together, and an alcohol-free cocktail. What you'll get in Morten's RTDs is you'll get a little bit of heat, you'll get a little bit of complexity, you'll get some length, you'll get some, you know, taste on the side of the tongue as well as the back of the tongue. That's as far as my ability to taste goes, I'm afraid, guys. But so to talk about it, but there's definitely a very different taste profile than somebody who's made a cocktail using a load of soft ingredients without thinking about the resistance a consumer needs if they're having an adult alcohol-free drink, or that little bit of heat they might need, or what I call speed humps, which are things that slow you down from drinking it too fast, because it's a drink to be sipped, not for rehydration. And that's the big difference. So when it comes to RTDs and the fact that there are some soft drink manufacturers playing in this space, they need to know the difference between what comes back down to being an adult soft drink and an adult alcohol-free drink.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So like you could have like a mojito lemonade or something like that. That's not the same as having an RTD mojito. That's helpful. Thank you very much. Before we move on, Florian, do you have anything else to add in this area? It's all right if you don't. I just want you to feel left out.
I was just thinking to what was said before. I think there's where I saw mostly the most improvement is probably in the 0%, in this no alcohol category for wine. Because I mean, if I remember how it was tasting many years in the past, the first product that were on the market, they were quite hard actually to understand. I mean, unless you were I don't know, hosted in an hospital and it was the only beverage that you were allowed to drink, I think really few people will have go to this product. And now it's quite amazing to see, especially on the zero, because for low, I mean, there's as Morten was saying, speaking about still wines, it's also even more true comparing the different colors. I mean, it's quite easier when you are doing a white or a rosé, and it's much harder to do a red wine still to compare with a sparkling wine. But in the zero, we've seen so much improvement in terms of quality that yeah, here you really see how the technology has been improving. And you have to remember that, as we were saying at the introduction together, David, most of the low category was existing initially just to be a kind of tool to pass some excises or the tariffs in between the different countries. It was just a tool for the winemakers to be under a certain limit or to modify the profile afterwards. But probably the initial goal was just to save on the tax and arrive at a certain price category on the market. Zero is totally different. Actually, it can be also that, but it's also a different product and a different perspective. But I would say that with the improvement of the technologies, we can definitely say that some of this 0% wine, they really deserve to be sold at a really high price. So everybody at the moment is speaking in France about this new investment done by the LVMH group in this sparkling product. And I mean, we are talking about a sparkling wine which is sold in France at least at 30 euros the bottle, which is not. I mean, they have nothing to be. They don't have to say they don't have to be red faced in front of them. I mean, they can be proud of getting this success and also having large luxury companies interested in the future of this category at least.
I just want to make a little bit a comment here because Florian said something very important about the price. That is also a misconception that we have in the industry, that de-alcoholized wine or alcohol-free wine should be more economic than normal wine, but it's not. Because like when we are making a de-alcoholized wine, we make the wine, so we have all the costs related to wine making, and then plus we do a de-alcoholization, which is another process which is costly, and also there's a yield loss. So I think that is very important that we also have this understanding in the industry that, and we need to educate the industry that, you know, having a non-alcoholic sparkling wine for 30 euros, obviously if the quality is there, it is amazing, and the consumer is, I think, willing to pay for it if they have a good quality product.
It's worth saying that for hundreds and hundreds of years, we've also overvalued wine, overvalued alcohol. Sorry, not overvalued wine, but overvalued alcohol. So that also plays into how the consumer perceives price, because we give alcohol such a high value for what it actually costs to produce. We're more likely to pay more for it if it's in a heavier bottle, not because the product inside the bottle is any more expensive to produce. So we're countering two things when it comes to price point.
And that is a lovely segue. So thank you very much. My next question, which is, and this is partly based on maybe on the both on trade and, you know, in bars, but also at home. You know, how do customers choose what they buy, and also for, you know, what the impact does any medals or awards from the likes of the IWSC make to those buying decisions? And Laura, as you're on screen, I'll let you start if that's all right.
Well, I think, you know, the consumer still needs to be very much led in this space. So actually the on-trade is a really important place for people to experiment and try. And it's a big, important part of trial. And also because you go out to have a drink that's made properly in the proper glass with the right amount of ice, served by somebody who knows what they're doing. And so that's a really important part of people's overall experience of alcohol-free, particularly if it's for the first time. But otherwise, actually, we very much buy what's in front of us. And so the supermarkets and the retail are massive gatekeepers in this space to what it is that people will try for the first time, particularly for their entry into alcohol-free. In the UK, we have quite a buoyant online trade as well. So I think people, once they do decide they like some alcohol-free, will then, you know, shop around and are more likely to want to buy online. But supermarkets and wholesalers, therefore, have a big influence on what we have. And wholesalers in particular are massive gatekeepers in the low and no space. They often won't take on new product. They're not very good at taking risk or dealing with excitement. They want to have stability, and that is actually something we identified in our report in 2015 and is still true today. And we've got a report coming out about events and food service, which basically says wholesalers are letting the whole of the category down.
Any thoughts from anyone else on this, Claire? Claire, as our judging committee member, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think, you know, medals and all of that really work to give confidence to the consumer at the point of purchase. So, of course, you would expect me to say that. But I think Laura's right. You know, there's a lot on the shelves now, and you know, consumers often look for some signposting to help them make decisions. And I know from experience, and Irem and Laura, who have been on the judging panels for the IWSC, just how seriously we take our roles in making sure that we're giving good feedback to the producers, but also that we're awarding products that we really do think deserve a medal. Because ultimately, you know, what we're trying to do is to grow this category. To Irem's point, now it is a category, and it's still yes, about 10 years old, but nascent. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that the consumer gets a really great first experience, second experience, you know, that wants to explore the category, that's not intimidated by the category, that, you know, that there's some great products that they can come back and try, and that the competitions like the IWSC really do, I think, unlock a lot of that for the consumer when they are in a retail environment. And then to echo Laura's point, I think, you know, the on-trade have come such a long way in helping, you know, meet us where we were 10 years ago, to help educate the consumer through their menus, through recommendations, through you know, the great fantastic cocktails that we're now seeing on menus. Even, you know, thinking about how menus are put together these days, it's not, you know, no and low drinks aren't kind of segregated at the back of the menu like some sort of embarrassment. You know, they're now fully, you know, integrated and proudly shouted about. So I think you know, that's something that we need to also recognize, just how important the on-trade is to the consumer's experience. And then equally, how can the consumer go into retail environments and find the breadth of options that are often available to bartenders? And that again kind of speaks to Laura's point about how, you know, we can't gatekeep all the amazing products that are now being produced. So wholesalers really do need to kind of, you know, catch up a little bit, I think.
I think there's an interesting thing that we're all working with in the non-alcoholic space, and that's skepticism. And I think that for all free-from products, you know, and it's something to be really aware of, and it goes into exactly what Claire's saying, and it is to really emphasize the great products out there, the ones that help build the category and make it happen, because consumers are skeptical, and they should be. You know, they're spending their money, and what should they spend their money on? And it's our job as you know, category people and people that are part of this category to really hold their hand through that skepticism and help them through the way. And I think awards is a great way of doing that, especially when it's awards that has a serious panel behind them, because there's a lot of awards out there. Sometimes you win awards and you haven't even participated, you know, which is weird. But there's you know, the ones that are actually serious and not just want you to buy a medal, I think helps a lot. It's helped us tremendously in our journey, and we continue to support the awards organizations, and we think it's really helpful in our work. The last statistic that I read in terms of on-trade and off-trade is that 2/3 of non-alc consumption is purchased at home. So the off-trade is really an important channel for the growth of our category, and we can see that in all markets. With some markets we start in retail, we start in on-trade, but at the end of the day, it always ends with retail for us as a brand, because the more mainstream we can be, the more people we impact, and the bigger difference we make.
Excellent, thank you very much. I know that Claire's done a lot of work with the team at the IWSC to, it's an ongoing process to make sure things are judged as fairly as possible. And as different things come in, tweaks need to be made, and finding the right judges and all that sort of thing. It's something I've done with some other categories, so I know how difficult it is. But you get there eventually.
But if you just map that amazing journey from the very first time I judged IWSC to where we are now, the quality of the product coming through is so different, but also the range is very different. So in the very first one I judged, there was hardly any wines, and now we're getting flights of wine by grape varietal. So in itself, if you just map the progress of the entries to things like IWSC, it really is a state of the category snapshot in itself.
And also at this point, I mean, the competitions, like, again, as Morten was saying, there's so many competitions, but like the good quality competitions like IWSC is very important for consumer to help the consumer to make decisions, but also it's very important for the category for itself, because again, as Laura's saying, it has like a tremendous increase in the quality, because a few years back when we judged in the competitions, there were like really faulty products, but now we don't see any faulty products, and now like lots of great products and high quality. So I think the competitions help the category and in the industry as well. So let's finish this part saying, don't forget to submit for the next competitions.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Don't forget.
Minute. Okay, right. Well, I want to thank my panel for joining us. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I've had to really struggle not to delve off into too many different directions because there's so much to discuss. And hopefully we might do something like this again, where maybe we do get a little bit more technical or go down a particular rabbit hole. Would be quite fun. Anyway, we'll finish off with final thoughts from everyone, and also perhaps something that you're kind of looking forward to, hoping to see in the next sort of 2 or 3 years in the category. And Eren, we'll start with you, please.
So I mean, yes, we can talk about this for hours and hours, because there's so many things happening in the category, so that we can talk about them. And this is, I think, my excitement in the category, to see that much improvement, quality improvement, and choices, and also availability. But also what I see and I hope to see in the next 3 years is especially in the wine side, because wine is still in the early baby steps of the category, and it's growing. But what I expect to see, and I kind of have lots of belief in that, almost all those big producers, they will have line extensions with the dealcoholized or non-alcoholic wine versions, and then there's gonna be lots of blurring in the category lines, not really strict the differences between wine, dealcoholized wine. So it's going to be part of the whole I think the consumption of the leading by the next generation. Yeah, so I think it's exciting times are coming. We're just still at the tip of the iceberg, I think.
Yes, I guess when you think about how long wine's been around for, comparatively. Laura, please.
I guess drink-wise, I'm really looking forward to the red wine that closes that gap. I think it's the most popular product request from customers in the shop. So I guess there's a lot there still to do. And then I think for me, the biggest shift will be when there's a lot more availability in retail, and retail of all sizes, not just the big supermarkets. And that's when I think the shift will really happen.
Short and sweet. Thank you very much. Florian.
Something in between Irem and the previous discussion. Let's free the borders between wine and no or low alcohol. I guess that, or I expect, or I wish that in the next 3 to 5 years, there won't be only specialists in this category, but every single producer or bottler will definitely want to have his own low or no in his range. Because I mean, at the moment, it's still really specific people who are fully convinced about that. and many others who are along the road and don't want to come in this category. And I think that in general, at least speaking again for the wine business, we need to find a way to keep the growers still alive and still in good shape to produce grapes. Even if they do wines with alcohol or no alcohol, we need to keep this all this basic step of the pyramid to produce either no, low, or wines with alcohol. So this is my wish or my expectation for the future, at least.
Thank you very much. Morten?
So imagine doing this call in 3 years from now, and I'm quite sure the first question wouldn't be, what is no and low and why does it exist? But everybody knows by then why it exists and why it's here. And I think that's where we're heading with the speed that we've had over the past 5-10 years of developing this category. It's a really, really bright future for everyone who's in the category, everybody who's considering going into the category. We welcome you and we applaud you. And I think it's going to be really, really exciting to see what happens. In my opinion, we will see a much broader space in the aisles of the grocery. We will see even more menus in the on-trades, and we'll see much more innovation. Personally, the innovation part is what really excites me. So we are excited about our future generations, but I'm also very excited about all the other brands that are creating amazing stuff out there. So it's a big playground, and it's a lot of fun, and we're there for the consumers, and they have a bright future, or bright options ahead of them, I should say.
And Claire?
What everybody said. But I think, I'm excited to see more innovation, more diversity, more choice, more access. And I'm also really interested to see how the growth of this category continues to drive how socializing is going to change. So, how we get together, when we get together, will this category drive different types of occasions that aren't so rooted in the evening, perhaps, or with food? So I'm really excited to see how this category evolves, and also how it kind of unlocks the importance for us to kind of stay together. There's so many drivers, there's so many sort of barriers to connection, there's so many distractions, so many reasons not to go out, so many opportunities to stay home or be on a screen. And I think, when we look at like what's happening with hospitality and the on-trade, I love to kind of think of this category as giving us more excuses to go out and to engage with one another rather than less. So I'm really excited to see even more opportunities for us to come together than not.
Wow, it's a fabulous way to end. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the IWSC, and we hope to see you again soon. All the best. Bye-bye.